What is going on, my fellow degenerates? Dylan here. This week, Dan and I got together to discuss our favorite fire and ice picks for the upcoming fantasy football season based on their current ADPs. Some of the guys, we really agree on them, and other guys, a little bit more split. So, if you're getting ready for your upcoming fantasy football draft and trying to see some great value picks you can get, as well as some potential landmines to avoid, this is the video for you. As always, make sure to subscribe and like the video to keep up to date on what your favorite degenerates are up to. See you boys in the video.
In audio.
3, 2, 1, action. Welcome back to the DGen Fantasy Football Podcast. We have a little bonus episode this week with redraft fantasy starting back up in a couple weeks. Maybe your draft is in 3 or 4 weeks. We wanted to get some ice and fire picks out there. With me today is Dylan Rains, and I'm Dan Schmader. And today we're going to go over fire picks of QBs, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, and do the same with ice. Keep in mind, though, these players that we're talking about, if we do ice them, it's not because we think they're bad. It's because their ADP is just a little bit too high, and we think there's values you could find elsewhere. So to get us kicked off, my fire QB pick, one and only, yet to be re-signed, which makes it a little bit scary, Dak Prescott. Now, Dak absolutely killed it last year as a top 5 quarterback in the league, absolutely torched the second half of the season. His current ADP is 701, which I believe is a screaming hot value. I imagine, Dylan, you agree with me here. After last season, the bye week, their offense completely moved away from what they hoped and thought would be a absolute stud in Tony Pollard and went to the most consolidated passing attack in the league with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and another guy we're going to talk about shortly down the road. But yes, Dak's rushing upside is limited. And we all know a pocket QB in fantasy football, to be relevant, needs to throw for 4,000 plus yards, 25 plus touchdowns to be in contention for a top 5, top 7 finish. Dak is definitely a pocket passer QB. I'm not saying he has rushing upside besides his 200 yards for the season. But I do believe that he's set up to absolutely smash those benchmarks of 4,000 yards, 25 touchdowns. I think he's going to have 4,500 yards on the season, over 30 touchdowns. And that is because CeeDee Lamb is still there, who is also yet to be re-signed. So it is risky. But CeeDee Lamb is there. The system is in play. And Dak's going to come back and absolutely tear it up this season. Take him in the 701. Take him a few spots early. And instead of going for that 5th round guy, that 4th round guy, grab some RBs, grab some receivers, maybe an elite tight end, and wait for Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I like Dak a lot, so I think his top 5 finish for sure this year, once again, with that offense.
Yeah, and like I said, last season, those who took Dak probably, hopefully they didn't trade him, but maybe they felt a little shaky in the start. But that their scheme was different. There was a scheme change. He absolutely loves hyper-targeting CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson. Brandon Cooks is not the greatest two at this age, but he's still around. They have some other guys who are coming up, and I think we're going to see pretty much an identical system to last year, but for the entirety of the season.
Yeah, for sure. So my fire QB pick is going right after Dak. He's going at the end of the 7th round. It's Kyler Murray. He's currently the QB9 right now. Kyler, last year he finished with 20 points per game fantasy wise, which was pretty good point per game wise. Coming off that injury as well. So this year he's another year removed from the injury. So that's always good. And then they got a bunch of new weapons over there. And some big pieces on the offense. Obviously, Trey McBride. Last year, he took a jump to be one of the most elite tight ends in the NFL. And then, obviously, with the 4th overall pick, they selected Marvin Harrison Jr. Everyone knows Marvin Harrison Jr., probably the best wide receiver prospect in the past 10 plus years. You got to love that as a Kyler owner. So I think it's very simple to see the Kyler upside here.
Yep. I completely agree. I think he's probably an even better value than Dak. I think he's an absolute steal. You know, there are guys, and I still might draft a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson early. But if you miss out on those two guys, or I'm high on Mahomes this year too. Maybe he's in play.
Yeah.
But if you miss out on that initial break and you want a skill player in the third or fourth, you're in luck because Kyler is going in the seventh round somehow. People are fatigued from that injury last year, and he's going to be absolutely dominant this year in that offense.
Yeah. One of the other things I like for Kyler this season is I think their division got a little bit weaker as well. The Seahawks don't really have an identity right now. Bringing in Mike McDonald, Gino getting another year older, had a bit of an injury scare there, but looks like it's nothing, but who really knows? And then the Rams losing Aaron Donald to retirement. They play them twice a year. Obviously, Donald not being there is huge. So, um, little divisional battle.
Yeah. Wheels up for Murray. Wheels up. All right, getting into receivers. My fire pick for receiver might be a bit of a surprise because he is getting older. They have a young stud there named Brandon Ayuk. But don't fade Debo Samuel quite yet. His current ADP is at the 307. But I legitimately see him pushing for a top wide receiver 1, top 12 finish, if not a really solid high wide receiver 2. He's going after Devontae Adams, after Drake London, after Nico Collins, after Mike Evans, and after Olave. Now, I think Olave, Collins, and Evans, you can take them before Debo, but I'm not necessarily sold on Devontae this year. His volume target share should still be high. Drake is there, but seems risky. I think you wait for Debo to be your kind of spike week, high end, high ceiling player. Yes, Brandon Ayuk is there, but it's pretty clear after last season Ayuk's role isn't really heavy volume in that offense. I don't see him ever pushing for more than 120 targets, 130, kind of in that stratosphere. I see him being used exactly like they did last year, 110 targets, maybe a little less, super efficient downfield target. But I think Debo in that offense is really he's really the anchor in that receiver room. They will still have him have some rushing upside, maybe in the red zone as well. And second half of last season, which actually happens to be right after I traded him, he went for the wide receiver 10, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1, 11, 13 finishes. And he did that because he had rushing touchdowns. CMC is clearly the team, the guy that makes it all run. But Debo is also in the 49ers stalwart in the receiver room for years, and that will not change. The upside is if CMC or Ayuk if they have an injury or Ayuk isn't who we thought he is, it's wheels up for Debo. He's going to crush it, and he can single-handedly win you matchups with his spike weeks. But keep in mind, if you do draft Debo, make sure you take a receiver in the first or second round who's a really consistent, kind of steady Eddie type of guy. That way, when Debo puts dud weeks, it won't kill you.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Debo here, especially in the third round. If you get him as your second wide receiver, a lot of upside. And like you pointed out, obviously CMC is the guy there, but when you watch the Niners play and you listen to breakdowns of their game, you really see that the offense mainly almost runs through Debo, actually, in terms of opening things up and unlocking the short field for CMC. So they're always going to Debo on first or second down to start the game. So he will always get those opportunities, even if he doesn't have the upside of the yardage that Brandon Ayuk has.
Yeah, and I think it's time we give Debo the respect he's due. The last couple seasons he's been injured. I understand that, but we really should not try to project injuries. I think he's a real value in the third round, and you should really be targeting him.
Yeah. All right. In terms of my fire pick for wide receivers this year, I have another older receiver as well, is Amari Cooper. His ADP is currently 57, which is the wide receiver 29. And I feel like his ADP is just well below what his floor is. If you look at the past 5 seasons, his finishes have been 20, 10, 27, 15, and 10.
Mm.
Uh, so two low end wide receiver ones and then all wide receiver two finishes. So, I mean, wide receiver 29, I think he's one of the biggest like no brainer picks in your fantasy drafts. Getting him at
Yeah.
that like 4 or 5 turn area. And then he doesn't really have any competition either. They brought in Jerry Judy, who still remains to be seen anywhere on a top 20 list. And then David Njoku is back again. He was really much more of Flacco's guy than Deshaun's. So we'll see what the offense looks like this season. But I don't see how you can't draft Amari Cooper at his current ADP.
Yeah, that's really a no-brainer at this point because Judy, I mean, I haven't even seen him on top 50 lists.
Yeah.
And then in Joku, like you said, with Watson there, hasn't really been that high volume guy we saw at the end of the season. And then there's also people out there that are predicting a Deshaun Watson, finish that resembles more of his time at the Texans. But even if that doesn't happen, because I'm not necessarily sold on the Watson finish yet, it's Amari Cooper, and that is about it, especially without Nick Chubb potentially there to start the season.
Yeah.
All right. Now, time for my favorite fantasy football positional group, running backs. So, my running back fire pick this year is 7th rounder Isaiah Pacheco. And I don't think I'm alone here as ADP is the 308. And that is after guys like Derrick Henry, Von Achan, Travis Etienne, and Josh Jacobs. But the Chiefs offense is clearly taking another step forward. It looks like they're getting more receivers back in the room. And that's coming after last year when they really put an emphasis on playing good defense, controlling the line of scrimmage with their offensive line. And that kind of opened up the door for Pacheco to see some really relevant fantasy production. So I think now that they're improving their receiving core, maybe pushing the field again, and still owning the line of scrimmage, we're going to see Pacheco just absolutely skyrocket this year. The one thing that we didn't see last season is Pacheco really capitalize on red zone rushing touchdowns. And I think if he can get that together, he's going to be a lock for an RB1 finish.
Yeah, I mean, Pacheco was a monster last year. He was so fun to watch. Great runner, hits the hole hard. Great down the playoff stretch there, both in fantasy and in the real life. So, yeah, I take him over a lot of those guys getting drafted ahead of him.
Yeah, I'd certainly take him over Josh Jacobs. I think Jacobs is in a bit of a rough way right
Yeah.
now. I'd probably take him over Achan as well.
Yeah.
And then Derrick Henry and Travis, we'll see. They've got good volume going on, but
Yeah.
Pacheco's on the best offense in the league, the best offensive mind in Andy Reid, and he's got a serious amount of juice.
Yeah. He's hard to bet against here. My fire pick for running backs this upcoming season, he is currently going in the 11th round with an ADP of 114, is none other than Zeke. I know what everyone's going to say. He's 29. He's old. He's washed up. That's okay with me. We just need 1 year from him. Currently, he's getting drafted behind guys like Tyjae Spears, Trey Benson, Gus Edwards, and just around the, like guys Blake Corum, Chase Brown, Jerome Ford. I think if you decide to take Tyjae Spears, Trey Benson ahead of him, you just, I don't know what you're doing. You don't want to win your fantasy league. I mean, last year we already touched on it a little bit with Dak, but Dallas was the highest scoring offense in the league. They averaged almost 30 points per game. And if you look at the past 3 seasons for Dallas, looking at their running back rooms, they've averaged over 500 opportunities, which is rushing attempts and targets, 15 plus TDs, and 2,200 yards. So obviously, not all of those will go to Zeke, but They got Rico Dowdle there, but other than him, we got Royce Freeman, who's really going to be a nothing. He's been on 5 teams in the past 4 years, so I expect Zeke to get the majority of those opportunities this season, and I could really see him getting 10 plus touchdowns as a goal line back there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a crazy value. It's perfect if you're running kind of with an anchor RB early on. And then I agree, Chase Brown, he may not be a starter. Tajay Spear, same thing. Like at that point in the draft, you're really either drafting like handcuffs or maybe guys who are pushing for their starting role, like those two. But with Zeke, his pass protection is elite. And that hasn't changed with age. It
Yeah.
hasn't changed with him losing a step. The Cowboys trust him. The organization trusts him. He's going to be on the field a ton. Not exactly sure how many snaps, what his snap share will be, but he's going to be out there and he's going to get a ton of volume.
Yeah. So I think even if you don't wind up with Zeke in your draft, I think you should try and pick Rico Dowdle up as well. He's going up like 2 rounds later than that. I think getting any piece of that Cowboys RB room is a good strategy to follow.
Absolutely. And last but not least, the tight end position, which many of us hate the tight end position in fantasy football. But hopefully, Jake Ferguson will help you have. I'm not going to say he's an elite tight end, but hopefully a guy who's consistently getting you, 10 plus points a week, and someone who I really feel can push for over 10 touchdowns as well in that offense. His ADP is currently 8.5, so early middle of the 8th round, and he's going after guys like Njoku, who we touched on a little bit, not really having as big of a role with Deshaun Watson. He's going after Kyle Pitts, who again that's all speculation with Kirk Cousins there and Zach Robinson and the offensive change. He's going after Evan Ingram, who I think we're going to touch on, and after Dalton Kincaid. But Ferguson needs to start getting the respect he's due. He had the most red zone targets in the league for the tight end position last year. He almost pushed for 800 yards after a really slow start to the beginning of the season. And he had over 70 receptions. And this season, like I said about when we talked about Dak, it's the most consolidated passing attack in football. One of the most. It's CeeDee Lamb, and then it's really wide open. Brandon Cooks is old. He had a good end of the year last year, but he's really not the guy who's going to push for 1,000 yards like he used to. Ferguson is the number 2 target after his CeeDee Lamb. And again, if you could take into consideration the uptick we should see in Dak's play, CeeDee Lamb's play, and hopefully he can convert on those red zone targets he got last year, he's going to push for over 10 touchdowns, and he's going to push for a top 5 tight end finish that you got in the 8th round.
Yeah. I think Ferguson's an incredibly safe pick, especially at that current ADP. He's by far and away the number 2 target on that team. They didn't really draft anyone, which I really like. So for his outlook, so there's no one like Ryan Flornay who's going to come in and take targets from Ferguson. So
Oh, and like Ferguson got over 100 targets in
Yeah.
year 2, right? He's a little bit older. He came in older in the league, but he got over 100 targets in year 2. I do think there's space for Flornay or I think Malik Washington is another rookie on that team. No, is he on
Miami.
he's on the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Okay, so Flornay,
They
who I
got-
actually like and respect.
Yeah.
Who's the guy? Who am I thinking of?
Well, their other rookie tight end is, I think, like Brevin Spanford, who's no name, sitting
Yeah.
on my taxi
And
squad.
Schoonmaker.
Yeah.
Schoonmaker still
Yeah.
might be there, but even if he doesn't take much of a push,
Yeah.
if he can get 15, 20 more targets, I mean, that's pretty rare for the tight end role.
Yeah.
And Ingram had a ton last year. We think that's going to come down a little bit, and
Yeah.
we're going to see Ferguson kind of cross that threshold that not many tight ends do.
Yeah. So definitely someone to note in your draft. And then the next guy as well, he's a veteran. He's the definition of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is George Kittle. His ADP right now, 60, end of the 5th round. He's tight end 7 ranked. I mean, Kittle's been an elite tight end for so many years now. Outside of 2020, where he only played 8 games, every single year since 2018, he's finished as a top 5 tight end. Um, so I don't know how you stick away from that. That's 5 years of top 5 finishes. I think once again, 49ers, one of the most elite offenses in the NFL. He's going to have so many opportunities to score. It's too hard to cover everyone on that team. And then I think another thing to note here with Kittle is Kittle always gets a bad rap of being injury prone. I think everybody just assumes he's injury prone. But outside of 2020, where he missed half the season due to an injury, he's only missed 3 games one single season. The other seasons have
Yeah.
all been 2 or 1 games missed. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, if at all. So I would totally draft him. Great upside. He also is one of the few tight ends that has potentials for boom games. We saw a
Yeah.
few times
Agree.
last year. He'll end up with like 4 catches, 80 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And it's kind of consistent that he does it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. There's very few tight ends who can legitimately like help you win a week. And yes, much like we talked about with Debo, they have some down games just because they have CMC, Ayuk. They have a lot of guys to feed, but when you have a tight end that can get you 22 points, 25 points, it's quite the positional advantage, and Kittle can legitimately help you win weeks.
yeah.
All right. Now it's time for our Ice Boys, guys that we are quickly fading. Again, it is worth noting that a lot of these guys that we like and we would love to have them on our fantasy teams. It's very, very true. I'd love to have all the guys whose names are on here,
Yeah.
just not at their ADP. Because you got to maximize on the guys that are in rounds, second round, fourth round, fifth round that you could get instead of drafting these guys. So the first one up, quarterback position, CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud is elite. He proved it last year. As a rushing or as a non-rushing quarterback, I do think he hits the threshold where he's like a top 10 every year pushing. And then he has those crazy seasons like Mahomes where he can get top 5, top 3. But what if I told you there were other quarterbacks like Dak Prescott who are going multiple rounds later that are going to have the same production? So this is all about ADP. Stroud is currently going as a 409 before guys like AR-15 who does have the rushing upside, which is fantasy gold in the 5th. He's going before Joey B in the early 6th, who I think, again, will have similar production to Stroud and Dak with that 4,000 plus, 25, 30 touchdown type of line. He's going before Kyler Murray, and he's going before Dak Prescott, who we talked about is going about in the 7th. So I would really say, unless you really, really feel good that Stroud's going to put up a 50 touchdown season, pass on Stroud in the 4th. Grab yourself a elite exclusive tight end like McBride or like Andrews, or a high volume upside receiver like Neighbors, who's going to have a shit ton of targets this year, like Cooper Kupp, who could come back in a big way this season, or a DJ Moore, who just signed, got the bag, and should also still see 130 targets on the year. And then go get that quarterback a couple rounds later.
Yeah. This pick hurts me. I love Stroud. He had a great finish last year. I think part of it also too is as the offseason goes on, we kind of forget a little bit about the moments of the previous season. And watching him, if you go back and watch any of the tape, like that one game against the Bucks where he had to come back within under a minute, it's just you could really see how special of a player he was. So not that I totally disagree with this take. We could totally see week 1 where he's back throwing the magic out there. But like Dan said, he doesn't have any rushing upside. And there's a lot of guys that do that are getting drafted around him. So
Yeah. And it is worth noting, Stroud tied for first in the league last year in 300-yard passing game. So that is a person who is he's one of those pocket passers like Joey B or Dak who is going to be fantasy relevant, or Mahomes. But when you can get that same guy and the fourth round receiver or Kenneth Walker or whatever,
Yeah.
maybe that's the play to do.
Yeah. All right. And then the QB that I'm icing this season, he's actually going QB6. One ranking behind Stroud is the electric glass cannon AR-15. I mean, we all know AR-15 played amazing last year, but in the few games that he had, and the issue was, yeah, those few games is all he had. Um, I mean, QB6 is such a high rating. That's top six QBs. I mean, that's pretty key in a formula to a championship team. And I don't know if that's quite on AR's plate. Everyone knows fantasy wise, best ability is availability. It's remained to be seen if that will be the case for this season. And looking at last year, yeah, he had flashes of greatness, but he only threw the ball 84 times and had 25 rushing attempts. I think that's really not much to go off of. And it's a lot of stock being put into a very small sample size. They didn't necessarily play all that great of teams in those big blow up games. He had his most fantasy points up against the Rams at the beginning of the year, and the Rams at the beginning of the season were not good. Their offense was a complete mess. Hadn't really figured anything out. So, yeah, I don't know. I think this is just a very, very, very large risk. And I wouldn't be surprised if he finished top five, but I think the chances of that are much lower uh, of happening. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think they're lower than people are like putting in like ahead of time. They're thinking it's a smash pick. He's a rushing upside guy and he's going 2 rounds after the Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. But
um,
he does have a ton of risk. And if you take AR as your quarterback in the 5th round and he does bust, you're going to be in a really bad way after that. So if you guys are taking AR-15, make sure you grab like a Matt Stafford,
yeah.
maybe grab a Jaden Daniels, and that way you have some sort of escape valve if AR-15 gets hurt or he has a 55% completion percentage and is just not a productive enough passer to put to use that rushing upside, which I also think is a possibility. It is worth noting the Colts offense looks like it's getting better. They've got Pittman, they've got Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell came in as a rookie. JT is still there. So the pieces are in place. I think Steichen's a good coach, but it is very, very risky without us really having seen it through,
Yeah.
half a season even.
Yeah.
Okay. This one, moving on to receivers. This one hurts me because I sent the bag for Drake London. But that was in Dynasty. And I'm not saying that Drake London isn't going to be I'm sure he's going to cross that top 24 threshold barring injury. He's the alpha receiver with Kirk Cousins, who came back also so fast from an Achilles injury with like zero buzz about it. I felt like we got daily updates from Aaron Rodgers' Achilles rehab. And then Kirk Cousins just does it, stays silent, and look, he's already back in training camp and
Yeah.
throwing dimes.
It's that New York versus Minnesota media. I think
Yep.
the only clip I think I saw of Kirk Cousins was him at a trapeze with his kids, and someone was like, "Yeah, he looks fine here."
He's totally good. So that gives me a lot of, as a Drake London owner in a dynasty, it does give me a lot of hope. That being said, London is going at the 206, which is pretty crazy, honestly.
Yeah.
If you think about his production, I don't think London's ever finished as a top 30 receiver.
Correct.
Yep. He's never finished a top 30 receiver. He's going in the middle, smack dab middle of the 2nd round. This is before Mike Evans, who I think still has juice and situation as last year stayed the same. Baker loves him. Nico Collins, Waddle, Ayuk, and Debo we talked about. Drake London probably has a higher target and volume advantage over those guys, especially Ayuk, Samuel, and Waddle and Nico, just because they have to share their receiving room with other dudes. But it's more so about the offense. The Falcons get they were a train wreck the last 3 years. They got a new coach, they got a new quarterback. We all assume it's going to get better, but that's an assumption. These are offensive with Miami, the Texans, and the 49ers, and those offenses are locked and loaded. You can be certain that their receivers are going to have productive years. So again, Kirk's propped up a lot of elite fantasy targets in his time with Diggs back in the day and JJ. But will that remain to be so on a Falcons team that has been tragic the last few years going into his age 36 season? I don't know. But I don't think it's worth a 206 at this point. Penix is there to be the backup, but rookie quarterbacks don't make wide receiver ones, and that's where Drake's being drafted.
Yeah. Yeah. I like Drake's upside, but it's like you said, the ADP is just way too high for what he's produced so far. But it almost feels like a little bit too much of a Cinderella story with Kirk Cousins coming in to save both Drake London's and Kyle Pitt's career. So, and turn around with Bijan after his great stat volume numbers, but somewhat disappointing rookie year. Yeah, I don't know if it's all gonna come together perfectly. So we'll see.
I think it could come together, but like not in the way that like this is representing in fantasy, where I could see London being productive, I could see Bijan being productive, and Pitts, but I can't imagine them all leading their positional groups in fantasy football.
Exactly.
You know, very few teams can do that.
Yeah, and it's not like what the team thinks with Arthur Blank saying how they're able to spend their pick on Penix because they believe they're a contending team this year already. So I don't think that's the case. I think they'd be lucky to make the playoffs, but not do anything when they get there. So
yeah. I mean, their one hope is that their division is also hurting.
Yeah,
with Carolina, tragic team franchise,
Yeah.
and the Buccaneers, I guess, are the contenders, and then the Saints are kind of in the same boat as the Falcons.
Yeah.
But still with our same, mid-tier quarterback. So we'll see. We'll see.
All right, and then my wide receiver ice of the 2024 season. This one also pains me a little bit. I'm such a fan of his, Malik Neighbors.
Wow.
It's one of the best wide receiver prospects in years, obviously, with Marv right up there. Some people argue he's better than Marv. I think I agree with that in some instances, but in terms of ADP, he's going at 40. That's beginning of the fourth round. He's going right around Rashad White, James Cook, Cooper Kupp, DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith, Trey McBride, Mark Andrews. So, I mean, I think all of those guys, Rashad, James White, they got RB1 upside. You got Cooper Kupp, DK. They have high-end wide receiver 2 upside, maybe even low-end wide receiver 1 potentially. And then McBride and Mark Andrews, both top 5 tight ends. I think Neighbors going right with them is just such a bad pick in terms of value. And it has nothing to do with Malik Neighbors at all. I want to make that very clear. Neighbors is exceptional talent. All the clips of him so far are so fun to watch, but it starts and ends with Daniel Jones. I mean, Daniel Jones is just so ass. Once again, going into next year, they're projected to be a bottom 5 offense. Daniel Jones hasn't thrown for more than 15 touchdowns since 2019. And Daniel Jones has also never supported a top 36 wide receiver in fantasy. I think that's just all you got to hear to avoid picking Neighbors right at this point.
Yeah, that was like the slap in the face I needed. I almost texted you guys about this the other night, but I was watching Hard Knocks, the Giants version, and I mean, this is classic. You watch Hard Knocks and you think every player on there is going to be a beast.
Oh yeah,
and this creeping thought, because we all know how the good Neighbors is. That is undeniable. The guy's a beast. He's a perfect NFL prospect, big, strong, great hands, and he has the mental capacity to be an absolute champion. Yeah. But the creeping thought I had was like, what if Daniel Jones can be not good, but above average, where he can prop up, be a Derek Carr who propped up Devontae Adams
Yeah.
that one year they played together. But the truth is that Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback. He had a couple decent relative seasons because he had 700 yards rushing one year, and he kind of has like going on. But again, that's not going to help Neighbors. Neighbors' is only hope to being, a top 25 guy is he just gets peppered with targets.
Yeah.
But that doesn't justify a 4th round draft pick.
Yeah. I think his year is going to go very similar to Garrett Wilson's last 2 years, where he's top 5 in the league in targets, but he still finishes with 12.5 fantasy points per game.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, but yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. You never know.
Yeah.
You never know. But all we can do is just do our best with the information that we have
Yeah.
and the past and history of players and see what can change. But testing, and there are some players that are outliers, right?
Yeah,
Like
of course.
Kyron, no one's ever done what Kyron Williams and HN have done, or Eckler.
Yeah. Puka from last year.
And Puka, but we trust these guys because the situation seems right.
Yeah.
They have the quarterback, they have the volume share, the depth chart, whatever. But unfortunately, with a receiver, if your quarterback is trash, like there's not much you could do unless you're Debo and you get handoffs and rushing opportunities. But at running backs, this feels like a hot take, and I really don't want it to be a hot take because I think HN is amazing. But my ice pick right now, and I'm moving away from the last couple days, is Devon HN. ADP is 210 and back of the second round. The second round really is a shit show, by the way.
Oh,
there are some risky guys in the second round this year.
Yeah, I've done some best ball drafts, so many mock drafts, and the second round I think is the scariest second round that I remember in recent years.
But if you nail those picks, like you're golden, pony boy.
Yeah.
I think Olave is kind of a nice second round pick, but that's besides. HN's going before Derrick Henry. He's going before my fire pick, Isaiah Pacheco. He's going before kind of an every down back in James Cook and an every down back in Rachaad White. These are all lead backs with like really sure thing volume quantities. HN can't say that. HN on average got 8 to 10 carries last year. He spelled Raheem Mostert, and they scripted him up for some things, but Mostert is still there, and Mostert is, yes, he's old as balls, but he still has juice. They drafted Jalen Warren. I'm not saying he's going to come take HN's spot, but I'm saying he's an NFL quality running back who can get runs and get some percentage rushing share in there. I think HN, the situation will remain much like it was last year. Maybe more touchdown opportunities with, I doubt Mostert's going to go for 20. But with that situation staying the same and his volume share staying the same, I don't think he cracks those 15 carries a game that people want him to get. Those 5 to 6 targets a game, I think it's very similar with Tyreek Hill there. If anything on that offense, Jalen Waddle is going to take the step forward, and then with that step Tua as well. But I think HN, they're very happy with what he brought last year, and there's no reason to change it. And at the second round, you could get either a true anchor RB, like a Derrick Henry or like a Pacheco, and then you don't have to draft one for rounds until then, or you can get a wide receiver with like serious wide receiver one upside, like Olave, or like a Drake London.
Yeah.
But they're all kind of risky at that point.
Yeah. I think when you just said it as simple as you can about Mostert, if you have a teammate who scored 21 touchdowns the previous year and they are coming back and they are still on your team, I cannot imagine drafting you in the second round. Obviously, there's going to be regression for Mostert, but 21 TDs last year, I don't think that shrinks to 5 out of the blue.
Yeah. Agreed. And Raheem Mostert, he's a trustworthy guy. Mike McDaniels, and Raheem were in the Niners together, and that was a period when the Niners had Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, and yeah, he was on the Giants recently. Matt, I can't remember. It was another just like
It's something.
undrafted
It's Breda. Breda.
Matt Breida.
Yeah, that's what it
Yes,
is.
good memory. So it was those three guys, and they rode them to victory.
Yeah.
I don't think McDaniels is the kind of guy who like thinks they need to have some workhorse running back. He can just mix and match running backs that bring different skill sets, and he'll utilize them and enhance them. But I don't see a world where HN is getting 15 rushing opportunities plus 4 or 5 receptions. And, if that happens, then I'm wrong. He'll be amazing.
Yeah.
But at this point, I don't see it.
I agree. Going a little bit later, but not by much, is my ice pick for 2024 is Josh Jacobs. Currently ADP 27, RB 11 off the board. I think the most important thing for Josh Jacobs this year is that this is Jordan's Love offense. I mean, he just got paid the most in NFL history, or tied for it. He looked great down the stretch last year. He is their guy. This is not the Raiders, where Josh Jacobs is the bell cow who is taking all the rushing attempts, all the receptions out of the backfield. Much different case. Also, I would have to guess that he's going to lose some snaps, whether it's AJ Dillon or Marshawn Lloyd down the stretch. My guess, 2 and 4 minute drills, especially to Lloyd as a younger guy who's much quicker, but we'll see. And then Green Bay, obviously, so many weapons on the team. They had 10 different players who had a receiving touchdown last year. And then last year, the team running back total was only 4 rushing touchdowns. So Aaron Jones had 2, AJ Dillon had 2, Jordan Love had 4 rushing touchdowns as well. So you don't think of him as a huge runner, but he will run in some instances, especially near the goal line. And then last final thing about Josh Jacobs, I think, is Matt LaFleur came out a few months ago when he was signed there. And LaFleur came out saying that he was surprised that the Packers released Aaron Jones. So I think you can take that for what you want, but I think the most important takeaway there is I think LaFleur was looking to split time between the two of them, like a committee. So I think now that Jones is gone, the committee isn't gone though as well. It's going to just shift to AJ Dillon, Marshawn Lloyd. I don't think any of those guys are worth anything fantasy wise, but I think they will be used enough to take away from Jacobs' opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. So this one is a tough one because where Jacobs is going, and if he did have a high volume, like there's a little bit of the risk kind of padded because he's not going in the second round or anything like he was the year prior. But like you said, I think he will be in a committee one, and I do think Jacobs I think we might have saw his cliff last year.
Yeah.
He got a huge volume share the year prior, and I'm gonna be honest, he doesn't look like he takes care of his body the way other guys do. He's been putting on weight. He gets these nagging hamstring and groin injuries. I don't know. I'm totally out on Josh Jacobs, and I think the offense isn't set up for someone to be, a 1,200 yard guy. That said, if Jacobs was going a little bit later, the contract kind of says they want him to be a guy, and he has produced in the past. So maybe if he drops to the 5th or 6th round, it's totally go for it. But I think there are better options here. You said he was going in the 4th round, right?
No, 3rd, early 3rd.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind. There's the risk is not padded
because
that's where you can get. That's where you can get Josh Allen. There's better options there.
Yeah.
I'm totally out on him. I think he's going to be I think he's going to miss a lot of time this year, although I'm not projecting injury. Just saying.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's going to be efficient at all, which is a shame because I love Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I'd love taking him in the back half of the 4th, but the front of the 3rd is just much too high of an ask.
All right. And finally, our ice tight end picks. Again, this has been another just absolutely loved young player that I am now fading just a smidge. Dalton Kincaid. His ADP is 503. And again, I might get crucified for this, but Kincaid going before Evan Ingram, who I am fading a little bit this season, but he had 133 targets last year. So I'm fading it from that number. I still think he gets over 100 targets in the offense. He's going before it's George Kittle, your fire pick, who I love. He's one of the few tight ends that can just absolutely smash a week and win it for you. And he's going before Kyle Pitts. And he's going before all these guys at least a round early. And again, with Pitts, he produced a couple seasons ago. It hasn't been great, but we've seen it.
Yeah.
With Kittle, we've seen it. With Ingram, we've seen it. These guys are important parts of their offense. The main argument for Kincaid is that he's one of Josh Allen's few elite targets. Now it's Kincaid, it's Curtis Samuel. I'm not going to call him elite. It's Khalil Shakir, and it's the rookie
Keon.
who we love. But here's my argument. Last year, Kincaid was already in that situation. Second half of the season, Diggs was non-existent. I think he finished the wide receiver 76 over the last 7 or 8 games of the year. And Gabe Davis certainly wasn't a beacon of consistency. He would have those huge 22-point weeks, and then he'd be absolutely nothing and get no targets. In that situation where Kincaid was arguably all alone with Josh Allen, he only eclipsed double-digit targets one time in that whole streak. And he only scored, and most importantly, he only scored 2 touchdowns on the season. Again, this isn't a Kincaid is bad or Kincaid sucks speech. It's that you can get similar output from guys going a round or 2 later. You can use that 5th round pick to get another upside wide receiver or running back or get a quarterback in that area.
Yeah.
So I'm holding on Pitts or holding on Kincaid and either grabbing one of the guys before him or waiting the back half of Kincaid's tier and grabbing a Kittle or an Ingram.
Yeah. I like this take a lot. I think Kincaid right here, this is suffering from something that happens a lot in NFL offenses for fantasy, is when certain players leave on the team, everyone is just making assumptions about who the targets are going to. So
Right. It's a fallacy.
yeah, it's a little bit like I mean, Derrick Henry leaving, Tyjae Spears getting bumped up to the moon. Obviously, this was in the offseason, but if you were doing any sorts of drafts at the point, whether it was dynasty or very early best ball drafts, Tyjae Spears was going in like the 7th round or much higher for dynasty, which is just unreal. And obviously, Pollard got brought in, not the case. So it's a little bit with Diggs leaving, Gabe Davis leaving, where the target's going to go. We don't know. I think Kincaid's a good bet for it, but the whole offense is just so unknown. The wide receiver room is basically entirely new. I mean, Shakir was there last year, but didn't play a lot. He had a good stretch down the end, but it's just not enough to look down and see for this year. I mean, heck, his over under for the first game for Shakir is 26.5 yards. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Kincaid, he, like Dan said, struggled a lot last year in a similar situation. I mean, he couldn't like outperform Dawson Knox when he came back from his injury. He was missing significant time. So
Right.
I think I like Kincaid a lot, but I don't see him being this high of a pick for a redraft this year. So
Exactly. Yeah. And the truth is the targets could just get spread out amongst James Cook, Cade, Samuel, a little bit Chase Claypool,
yeah.
Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Ray Davis. I mean, there's and then of course it's the Josh Allen show on the Bills, you know?
Yeah.
He is the heart and soul of the team. It's like Lamar. Just Josh has had that elite receiver at the beginning of his career in Stephon Diggs. So I'm out on Kincaid.
Yep. All right. And then my ice pick for tight end this year is going a little bit later than Kincaid at ADP 67. The tight end 8 is Evan Ingram. Um,
Mm.
he's a guy who I've fluctuated a lot on this entire offseason. Last year, he finished as the tight end 2. The previous year, he finished as the tight end 5. So 2 top 5 finishes. Uh, but there's going to be a heavy asterisk on those top 5 finishes. In 2022, tight end 5 was only 176 points, which is 10 points per game in 17 games. So it's just a very down year for tight ends. And then last year, the majority of his points came in a 6-game stretch when Christian Kirk was injured. In those 6 games when Christian Kirk was injured, he averaged 19.9 points per game. And when Kirk was healthy, he averaged 10.5 points per game. So obviously, Christian Kirk is healthy. He's back. And then, oh, look, they also got 2 new weapons: Brian Thomas Jr., high upside outside rookie, and then Gabe Davis, also similar position to BTJ, but they're both going to command targets and most likely eat into Evan Ingram's production. I wouldn't be looking at Ingram unless I fully punted on tight end in my draft. And even then, that's still mid 6th round. That's not that late. So if you're going to wait on tight end, I'd even wait a couple more rounds and pick Ferguson, who's a
Yeah.
much better upside. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all for that. I think the way I have these guys tiered out, the tight end room, and when I say tier, like I don't really want the first guy in the same tier, because there's going to be a few picks later where I can get the same guy. So tier 3 tight end for me, and so like tier 1 is Kelsey, Andrews, McBride, Laporta. Tier 2 is Kincaid. Tier 3 is Ingram, George Kittle, Kyle Pitts, and then the top of tier 4 is Ferguson. And then it just gets to absolute,
Yeah.
who knows what. So I don't really want Ingram at that top of the tier. I'll wait for Ferguson, who's like right on the cusp.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And the Jaguars offense, and like you said, there's a lot of mouths to feed for like a average to above average quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. T Law isn't my guy. So,
No. And yeah, quarterback who the team's afraid to move away, but he will never lead them to a Super Bowl.
yeah, I agree.
Well, that's our ice and fire picks based on ADP for the upcoming 2024 season. Tune back in next week. Make sure you like and subscribe. Turn the notification bell on. We'll see you next week.
Peace.